Okay.
Hello, thank you.
Now we have to act like we haven't been talking for like 5 minutes. No. So guys, welcome to the Eat Like Ruby podcast. I am here today by myself, but with a guest on Zoom. One of my, I was going to say OG. I'm going to say you're an OG, Eat Like Ruby, just because.
I'll take it.
Just because you was such a wicked part of Eat Like Ruby this year. Like you were pretty much in Eat Like Ruby most of the year, and it was awesome. So, Kirsten, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. So, I've got a few clients coming in over the coming weeks, and I just thought it'd be really cool. I think it's one thing for me to sit here and say like, my girls kill it with this and my girls kill it with that. And I was like, let's let the girls come on and actually talk about this themselves, and just kind of speak to your experience with nutrition and training, your experience in Eat Like Ruby, where you're at, what you've achieved, any and all of the things. I think we have such a big variety of girls in Eat Like Ruby, young, old, beginner, advanced students, full-time workers, mums like yourself. We have shift workers, FIFO, all of the things. And I think it's so common for people on the outside to think, oh, I wouldn't succeed or I couldn't do it because I'm too old or I'm too young or I'm a mum or I'm a beginner or whatever. I think we could find any excuse really. And so I just wanted to get real life, everyday girls in here that have any or all of those things and do the damn thing, which is you.
Love that.
So if you want, just tell everybody who you are, basic little summary. What is the life of Kirsten?
It feels like such a weird, like I talk about myself all the time to myself. Like I'm always in the mirror. I'm like, and today we're applying our makeup with this, but now you're asking me to do it like and actually be recorded. It's really intimidating. So I'm Kirsten, I'm 35. I've obviously been with you for like a good part of the year. Mm-hmm. I had such a shit relationship with food for a really, really long time. And then it was around the time of COVID that I joined with my first nutrition coach. It was just before COVID was hitting and there was no chicken at the shops and there was no toilet paper at the shops. And I was going to a gym and doing some group classes with a girlfriend, and I joined some PT because that was the only way you could get me into a gym. I had a fall on my knee and completely damaged my knee. So the only thing to do was strengthen it. And so that's what got me into a gym initially. And one of the ladies there was seeing a nutrition coach and gave me her number. And I went and had a consult with her, and I had this feeling of maybe I shouldn't sign up because I can't really get anything at the shops. But I'm like, no, I'll just give it a go. And it was the best thing I ever did. Like it literally changed my life. It was the right time to see her, the right time to do that. And she taught me so much about more just habits. I think so much of this journey has been about habit change for me, and realizing that not everything's going to be done overnight. And so during COVID and during the lockdown, I was fortunate enough to have a job and keep my job remotely. And I lost, I think in total, just before COVID and throughout COVID, total 40 kilos.
That is insane.
It is insane when I think about it. And purely just through diet and just exercise, like completely turned everything around. And like crazy when I think about 40 kilos, like that's a human. That's a really small human.
That's wild. What time frame, like how long was that?
So I would say I probably lost the first 10 or so kilos. I started pole dancing, like for pole fitness, I want to say around 2 years before COVID, maybe a little bit longer. And I think just the general pickup in exercise, because I was doing no exercise before that. And then just starting with gym for rehab on my knee. I would say 10-ish kilos, but then, yeah, through changing my food, it was a good 30-ish kilos that came off. So I would say it took me, maybe a year and a half to lose that. So I feel like in the grand scheme of things, that was pretty quick. And I feel like it almost ruined me for future weight loss and fat loss things, because I realized I had nothing else to do but track my food and exercise. So of course it was such a successful period. And now going back into any sort of fat loss is like, oh, I've got to go out. I've got to,
I feel like
got to day drink.
That's so funny because so many people in COVID, like you're like, oh, I had nothing to do except track my food. Most people are like, I had nothing to do except eat.
Exactly. I definitely came out the other end really appreciating COVID. Like it helped in so many ways for me. And I realized that that's such a fortunate position because so many people weren't. that lucky to come out loving it like I did.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's worth mentioning because you were in Victoria then, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because I think, I mean, we get listeners from everywhere, but I think when Queensland people hear COVID, because my sister's in Victoria, so what I think of as COVID is like 3 months, and my sister's in Victoria, and to her, she thinks like 3 years.
Yeah, 100%. It was ridiculous. Like, the fact that we couldn't, like, walk. I lived for going for my daily walks. We weren't allowed out the house for more than an hour at the time, or, like, going to the shops. Like, you only have to go to the shops sporadically. I went daily. Like, I put my makeup on, I did my hair, I took my bin out, I looked good to leave the house because I wasn't doing anything else. And so it gave me that opportunity to do that.
That's so funny. So then what happened from there? So say you've lost, can we talk numbers? Like when you had lost sort of the most weight, like what did you get down to?
So I started, and I hate that this is the number because I should have just eaten a little bit more donuts or something. I was 99.9 kilos at my heaviest. I just wanted to tick over to the 100.
That's so funny because I've had so many people that ticked over to the 100 and they're like, fuck, I wish I hadn't ticked over. Like that's such a significant thing to people. And then you're like, should have just gone that bit harder.
Just to round it up. So I was 99.9 kilos at my heaviest. By the time I finished with my first nutrition coach, I was down to 63 kilos. I got down to.
Wow.
Massive. And then I'm not sitting there now. I'm sitting at around the 72, but it's a very different 72 to what it was when I was 72 the first time around. So I got down to the 63. Then I actually ended up having plastic surgery. So I had a tummy tuck with full muscle repair. I have twin girls who are 14 now.
I was about to say, I feel like you've left out a massive factor that you've got 2 twin girls.
Yeah, just those things, you know, my little goblins. So I've got, twins who are 14. So I had them when I was 21. And then obviously you have pregnancy, and I had a hell of a lot of mental health issues and was on a lot of medication for mental health and just ballooned throughout the years. Yeah. So I had a lot of excess skin. Like obviously you don't get to nearly 100 kilos and don't have skin. And so I had a tummy tuck with full muscle repair, and I had a boob job as well. And
you're like, well, I'm in there.
Yeah, while I'm in there, just perk it all up. And then after that, I was no longer with my coach, so I stepped away from her when I reached the 63, just because I felt like I'd sort of had my time with her. I didn't feel there was anything else I could really gain from continuing, rather than just, hey, how you been? Yeah, great. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Yep. Got no questions. Go on my way. Yeah. And then once I left her, I got into a relationship with someone and found that the whole battle of, I've done all this while I was single. I didn't know how to navigate fat loss or maintenance or anything like that while being in a relationship with someone. Yeah. And so gained a little bit of weight back. Not too much. I think, I don't know, between like 5 and 8 kilos or something. Yeah. Had the surgery, just continued to eat like, you know, the apple pie and half a tub of cream wasn't as many calories as it was. And then sort of reached a point where I needed to do something. Again, I wanted to have a coach, and I don't remember how I got onto you, but I was following you and I was following Chloe as well. Yep. And you both released a thing saying you've got room, and oh no, you had room coming up. She had room. I jumped in with her, and then you released one. I jumped in with you and found out I was getting in with you as well. So I was going to do a short 3 months with her, and then I was getting in with you. And then I remember you knocked me back.
No, I knew this was going to come up. I knew this was going to come up.
You knocked me back because initially I had said, I think it was you were just going to run like the normal Eat Like Ruby program. But then you decided to run Train Like Ruby, and I had clicked home training because I'm like, no, I don't need a gym. I've done this without a gym. So I lost the 40 kilos without stepping foot into a gym. And you knocked me back because I didn't click gym training. So I got back on and I reapplied with gym training, and you accepted me. Then here we are.
That's so funny because I never even really knew that, because at the time, we didn't have Georgia at the time. I had assistants, and we sort of had a thing that was like, okay, this is a muscle gain, like training phase program. Like that was the big focus. And I'm like, so we can't do home training, muscle gain. Like it's just not going to really be ideal. So I said to them, like, if applications come through and they take home training, just let them know it's not for that. And then it wasn't until you'd literally been in for months. So obviously then you came back, applied, got in all the things. And then you were like, I got knocked back at the start. And I'm like, what? And you were like such a key participant in that program. And I'm like, we knocked you back. I'm like, imagine if we didn't let you in.
I'm so glad I jumped on, and I'm like, no, I'm not having it. Like, if you want me to join a gym, I'll join a gym. Because it was so out of, like, when you said it's a gym-based program, I'm like, fuck's sake, do I have to? I just didn't want to go to a gym. But I'm like, no. I just felt like it had come along at the time. And I feel like had I have joined you sooner, I feel like I still could have got something great out of it. But I feel like I've joined with you at a time where I was ready to receive what you were putting out there. And I feel like I've asked you so many questions along this way. And I feel like I repeat myself with questions, but it's because sometimes I'm just ready to receive them in a different way than I was initially. And I think you've been able to take me to a level that I would have benefited fantastically from you as a beginner, but I feel like you've given me something so much more than I realized that I needed as well. Like I could never take less than the education you have given me is, I can't even, like, you just lay it out so idiot proof and you never make me feel like, every time I've asked you a question, my favorite thing you say is, yeah, that's a really cool question. Like that's your answer to, it doesn't matter if I say like, how do you clean your toilet, Ruby? You're like, that's a really cool question. You just always, I don't know, I feel really validated. Like the first question I asked you was, Ruby, what's a superset?
I know. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to get you on here, because I knew that you'd had such a journey yourself before you even got to Eat Like Ruby. But then to literally watch you and now to even think that we knocked you back because of home training. And then you did come in gym training. And I remember when you and I spoke before we officially started, and we were just like, okay, like just go join the gym, kind of go in, get a feel for it, whatever. Like you were literally beginner gym vibes. And and then I remember like that first week of Queens and everyone was quite experienced in just kind of throwing weights around and that. And then you come in like, what's a superset? And I was just like, this is so cool. And it was so cool because we did have such experienced girls, but then we had you asking that and everyone was sort of jumping in like, oh, a superset. Okay, do this exercise, then do this. Like everyone was so helpful and you're like, oh, okay, awesome. And then just watching you then over the next few weeks jump in and be like, I just hit a hip thrust PB. I just did this. I just did this. I'm like, this is literally a girl who asked what is a superset like 6 weeks ago. And now she's like hip thrusting body weight. It was just
I feel like
so
if
cool.
I jumped out of my comfort zone so much to go to gym, when it was initial like a group chat, I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't do group chats. I don't participate like that. So when it came to like asking questions, I stalked some of the girls that were also in Train Like Ruby. And I saw like so many of them are nutrition coaches. But I'm like, I'm in the same space. Like I'm here for the same service and this is my section of my corner, and if I want to ask what a superset is, I'm going to ask what a superset is. Like, never mind that they're asking really advanced questions. I'm here for for my own reasons and getting my own stuff out of it. And I mean, if I can walk into the gym now and be fine, I can ask them stupid questions in the box. So
I think it's so cool, and I think that's so common, like so common to be like, I don't want to ask the head coach stupid question, but I think it's so funny because think about that space, and no one was ever like stupid question, Kate. And even when you did start asking other questions throughout those weeks and that, half the time I would come in to answer and there'd be like 3 other girls that have sent 2-minute voice messages fully answering your question, and then I would just be like, yeah, what she said. I've got nothing else for you. But I just think it was so cool to watch. And so when you came into Eat Like Ruby, so you came in around like April, May, and we went into a gaining phase, which is so cool. Like, I just think it's so cool for anyone to do a gaining phase, but to go from being overweight, big weight loss phase, like what was your mentality towards a gaining phase? Like, were you excited, or was there part of you that was like, I used to be heavier, why would I actively pursue that again?
Yeah, 100%. It was such a, like, when I wanted the opportunity to work with you, obviously I was conditioned for fat loss. Like, smaller is better, smaller number on the scale is better. I've worked so hard to lose weight. I'd never considered going the other way. And doing the gain, like, I cannot, again, not just working with you has changed my life, but doing a gaining phase, everyone in the entire world needs to do a gaining phase because it changed my mindset surrounding food. It changed my mindset surrounding my body. It just, like, the fact that I can eat so much food and I'm not rolling out of my house every day, like, that is insane. And I know so many people on, like, Instagram and stuff are posting, you know, it takes this many calories to actually gain 1 kilo of fat. And, like, it really does. Like, I can eat 72 things in a day and be fine. Like, it does nothing. I'm not going to all of a sudden not fit my clothes. And it, like, I gained weight. I think in total I gained maybe like 6 kilos.
I was going to say 4 to 5, yeah. Because I feel like you were, when you came in, you were probably just 70, maybe over, and then we finished around 75, 76-ish.
Yeah, but it was such a different composition to what I was, again, at, like, I say fat 76, but, like, a not, you know, like, a not controlled phase. Like, I was really happy with how my body looked like. I could still wear, like, crop tops at that weight because I had done the bulking phase. And then now that I have lost some of the weight, my shape is so different.
Your shape is wild. Like, when I saw your pics the other day from the pole, when you had, like, the red bikini, I was literally like, look at you, woman. Like,
and I'm sitting heavier than what I always think back to you saying don't hold on to a number, but obviously we always hold on to a number.
Everyone
and I'm
does.
sitting heavier than what would be my, like, optimal weight in my head, but I'm so comfortable. Like, a friend asked me the other day how I'm going with my training and stuff, and I just said to her, I don't know if it's also an age thing, but I'm so comfortable. Like, I would love to lose some more weight, but I'm so fucking excited for another gaining phase. And I'm so excited to sort of loosen the reins and do a bit of mindful eating and sort of practice some of that. But I'm just so comfortable. And I think that gaining phase changed it for me. Like, I cannot speak highly enough of what that did for my mindset, and just seeing what it does for performance in the gym, especially going back now and doing the same programs you've given me, but not in a gaining phase. My gosh, I've been humbled with the weights. Like, when I walked into the gym, my first hip thrust was 20 kilos. It was just a bar. I was up to a 90 kilo hip thrust by the end of the gaining phase. I'm now down to a 70. I don't have the food in me to lift to 90 anymore. And that's okay. Like, I'll bulk again, and then I'll hit that 100 and it'll be great.
I just literally love every single thing that you just said, because I just think it's really the underlying thing there is just a real, and I speak about it every single week, it's literally what I live for, but such an element of education which leads to control. So even if you're, like, not at, air quote, the number that you want to be at, or even if you do relax over Chrissy or you do another gaining phase or whatever, there's such a big element there of, like, but I'm in control of this. And if I wanted to tighten it up, I can. And if I want to go over here, I can. If I want to chase that goal, I can. As opposed to probably when you'd gain weight in the past, there's a very big feeling of this is not in my control. So I reckon that's the biggest thing. And that's one of the biggest benefits, I think, to the gaining phase, like you said, because you do kind of watch the scale go up and everything, but you're not, like, watching that thinking, fuck, I don't know why this is happening and I don't know what to do about it. You're like, and I think we get on and we see that increase, and you still kind of have that little reaction in your stomach where you're like, shit, because we're so used to wanting it to go down. But then you do kind of go through that mindset where you're like, hang on, I do know why this is happening. Hey, I do know what to do about it if I wanted to. And I think that was such a common thing in that program, especially as the weeks went on. Everyone would start coming in and being like, weight went up today, ha. And, like, it was just such a different shift in energy. And I think, like you said, the gaining phase, I feel like everyone should do it too. But it just serves such a purpose, I think, physically and mentally. And that's why I wanted to get you on, because I knew that you had just experienced all of that so much.
Yeah. I think as well, like, you said it so perfectly. I think it was in one of our first masterclasses for the gaining phase. You said when you're doing this, you're not a victim to the scale. You're not getting on the scale thinking, oh, fuck, it's gone up. Why has it gone up? No, you want to see those numbers increase, because if you want to grow your bum, if you want to grow your shoulders, you can't do that without also growing the numbers.
Yeah.
And like, duh. It's like the other thing that just sticks in my head all the time is, I'm not here to give you really simple advice. Like, if your goal is to drink more water, just drink more water. That plays in my head all the time. You want to eat more vegetables? Like, you want to increase your, just eat more vegetables. Like,
That's so
sticks
funny.
in my brain all the time.
That's funny. No, it's so cool and it's so true. I just feel like you've had like the best journey. So where are you at right now? Like, are you, so for people listening, I feel like we kind of summarized it, but we spent, probably would have ended up being, I reckon, 4, if not even 5 months in the gaining phase, probably
about that.
May to September-ish. And then we did a bit of time in a deficit as well. So are you still deficiting, if we want to call it that?
Still deficiting, but a little bit loose. I'm trying to incorporate a lot of, you've spoken so much on the podcast recently about mindful eating and taking days away from tracking. And I do have a bit of I think obviously I've got so many learned habits of food. You don't just change everything in one day. I've been on this journey for like 4 years now, and I still revert back to old habits. So if I have a day where I know I'm not tracking, I'm really shit with getting in protein. I'm pretty shit with not having my fruit, but I'm trying to incorporate some of those things. Like if I'm going out, like if I'm about to go out for dinner, I have a banana before I go out, because if I have a banana before I go out, I'm not going to sit there looking at the menu. I'm going to have this, I'm going to have that, I'm going to have this. If I've got something, and like water, even though just drink the damn water, I still really suck with that. So I'm trying to be really mindful about that when I have days that I'm not tracking. I like the idea of sort of sitting on a lower end of maintenance leading up to Christmas before I maybe boost it up. But yeah, I'll boost it up to more of a maintenance calories, and 100% will do another gaining phase. Another thing it taught me doing this was that old saying of, oh, girls shouldn't lift weights because they'll get too big. I'm going to the gym now, but I'm only doing cardio because I don't want to get big. I have big shoulders already. Such a fucking insult to people who work their ass off in the gym. You don't just like, yeah, I did a gaining phase for 4 months, but I'm no bodybuilder. Like, that shit takes so much time and so much effort to then turn around and be like, no, I don't lift because I don't want bulky shoulders. Doesn't happen. And like going through and doing like fat loss now after doing that, my shape is completely different to before I did this. So when you were first talking about, you know, every year you basically follow the same structure. You're like, I do a build, I do a fat loss, I do a maintenance. And I said to you, I'm like, are you just doing this all over again? What's the point? Are you just going back and losing everything you did in the build? But now I see it because my shape developed and my composition is slightly different, and things are growing and things are shrinking. And when we're thinking about the gaining phase as well, just to rewind there, entering the gaining phase, I remember the first couple of weeks as well, I was actually losing so many centimeters, and you kept pushing up my food. You're like, you're shrinking too much. Like that. It's a whole thing.
I know. It's so funny. I remember that as well. Actually, I actually do remember you asking me, do you just do this on a loop? What's the point? And I remember thinking, that's such a bizarre question. Like, no one's ever asked me that. And I think especially because so many girls in Eat Like Ruby were pretty much doing the same thing. So they weren't asking that because it was like the norm. And then you're like, why are people doing this? And then I was like, why are people doing this? Good question. And then I'm like trying to explain it to you. And I remember thinking, I've never really explained this to anyone. Like, that is a great question. That's so funny. But I remember increasing your food as well, like over and over. What was the highest food you ended up on in the gaining phase, like highest intake?
I think 2,600 calories, which I look at that now, and like with my first coach, my maintenance was 1,900, whereas that's my deficit with you. My deficit is 1,900 with you, and like that's crazy to me. Like, and I suppose just different education and different activity levels. My activity levels are certainly far more than what they were initially.
Yep.
But yeah, I think 2,600. And then when I was on maintenance with you, because I did a 2-week maintenance phase while I was comp training not that long ago, and that was, I think you had me on 2,300.
Yeah, because you would, like, your activity level's really high between gym and your pole dancing. But I think that's so cool because I have girls, so we've like just wrapped up the fat loss phase in Eat Like Ruby, and, you know, people, like, I will go so off topic, I'll try not to go off topic, but depending on size, activity level, so many things, people can lose weight from, some people need to be on like 13 or 1400 calories, some people need to be on 3,000. Like, it's so different, and it's so funny because I see so many girls who do diet on like 14 or 1500, and then when we talk about moving to maintenance, we start to mention numbers like 17 or 18, and they really freak out, and they're like, am I going to gain weight? And then people like you come to mind. I'm like, we've got Kay in the gym, 2600 cals, smashing the weights, trying to put on muscle, hardly going up in weight. And then we've got, you know, people over here thinking if they go from 1650 to 1700, they're just going to blow up. And I just think that's where the gaining phase can be so beneficial as well, because like you said, people are so scared of gaining weight, and when you really go into it properly, it's fucking hard. And like my gaining phases have been up around that 26 to 29-ish mark. We had other girls in that program with you that were on 29, so like 2,900. So it's just so interesting. Like you said before, you think that you're just going to blow up and you're going to blow out and everything, and then you're like, I'm eating 2,300 and I'm maintaining. I'm eating 24. I'm eating 25. It's just so, I think it's so cool to witness, because that's where I think people listen to the podcast or they hear me ranting and raving. And it's one thing for me to sit here and be like, eat more, eat more, eat more. But I think you have to have a period of eating more and really watching what happens. Because I think when you do that in a structured, intentional way, exactly like you did, I think to most people, any time in the past where they've like air quote eaten more has been kind of in that off track mentality. So they think it's quite a bad thing, and it does lead to weight gain because it is so off track and whatever. So I think the gaining phase can really change up our belief that anytime I eat more, I'm just going to blow out.
100%. And I think having the time constraint on it as well, like that was a 4 to 5 month period. And really, I thought, I've jumped out of my comfort zone to do a gym-based program. Like, let's just give it everything. And I mean, if I do this for 4 to 5 months and I roll out of the program, cool. I tried it and it wasn't for me. But like, I'm here and I'm doing it anyway. So let's just, like, I mean, you're not where you are because you're giving out shit advice. So I'll just trust the process. And I think that's something else, being that I've now had 3 different nutrition coaches. Coming in and following advice that maybe one of the others had an opposing opinion on or did things slightly differently, if I keep doing the same thing over and over again, I'm going to keep getting the same result. So being really, really open to maybe doing it a little bit differently. And I think that comes back on me as well. Like, I know what works for me. The flexible dieting is a game changer for me. But then I see people who might do like intermittent fasting, or they get given a really structured meal plan and that's what they plan to follow to the T. I'm like, I can't think of anything worse. Even though I eat the same thing every day because I want to, if you tell me to eat the same thing every day, no thank you. And I'm not going to, just out of principle. But I have to realize that does work for some people as well. So, yeah.
And that's why, you know, my number one saying there's no right or wrong, because I think to me, if you can put yourself in spaces exactly like you have different coaches, different programs, different phases, all those things, you really know what works for you. And I think you're such a perfect example. Like you said, you go into everything now with an open mind. It's so funny because the people who are in quite a good place, like yourself, like you're now quite educated, quite in control, in a pretty good place with your nutrition and training. You're very open-minded. If I said, let's talk about intermittent fasting, let's talk about something, you'd be like, okay, like I'm open to hearing it. Often the people that are in a very shitty place dig in their heels. No, like you can't do flexible dieting, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I think there's something in that. I think when you have been through things like you have and you've really built your knowledge and your education, and then how to apply that knowledge and education for yourself, you're like, you know what, I can go into a gaining phase. Like you said, worst case scenario, I'll come out of it. And it's so much more relaxed. I think when we don't have the foundations of like good education, that's where we can see people in that real frantic energy of like, how could I go into a gaining phase? What if it doesn't fucking work out? What do I do next? And that's where I think, like I said before, there's big elements of uncertainty and everything. But when you've actually gone through things like you have, you're so open-minded to dabble in different things and be like, well, I can always come back to this. And I think
100%.
that's so underrated because so many women, and I'm sure you can probably relate to this in the past, are so like desperate to find the thing. So the possibility of trying a thing that wouldn't work is like, no, I can't. Like, I don't want to risk anything. I don't want any possibility of trial and error. I need fucking help now. So yeah. I think, and it makes sense if somebody feels very lost and out of control, but that's where I think when you're willing to put in the work and learn something, you remove that desperation factor. And then you're like, I'm actually good to just enjoy Chrissy or enjoy a holiday or do a gaining phase, whatever. And I know I can always bring myself back to a good place.
Yeah, 100%.
And I just think that is literally life-changing when you think about it.
I think knowing that there is no quick fix, like people who are so resistant to do something, everyone's always like, oh, what's your secret? Like, how did you lose? Like, everyone always says, like, how did you lose 40 kilos?
You would get that all the time.
All the time. And even when I had surgery, I was so fearful of telling people because I don't want anyone to look at, oh, you had surgery, you cheated.
That's what it was.
I did because I had to lose the weight. Like, it didn't change anything about my body composition whatsoever. It got rid of the loose skin that was sitting there from gaining the weight and then losing the weight again. I still had to work my ass off to get there. And then I had to work my ass off to get back to a certain level after I had surgery. And there's just no quick fix. And like you say, you're going to be eating for the rest of your life. You may as well learn how to do it properly. So while you're wasting time trying to find the magic thing that's going to fix it all, you could really just be learning how to implement small changes. Like, I started this by being so resistant to just anything, really. And I don't know why. Like, I thought, oh, no, I can't weigh my food. Like, that takes too much time. Oh, no, I enjoy my V too much. Like, I can't, I'm never having sugar-free V. The very first swap that I made was sugar-free V. Like, I'm going to change nothing else about my diet. I'm just going to have sugar-free V. Then it was maple syrup. I just changed to sugar-free maple syrup. And then it just snowballed from there. It was literally like one tiny change. I had spent 30 years getting to where I was. I'm not going to flip everything around in 2 weeks. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's so based on your habits. Like I said, those bad habits creep back in sometimes. But I mean, I used to binge on like a packet of Tim Tams, a packet of lemon biscuits, and then a whole tub of Milo. Now I'll binge on cornflakes. Like, I fucking love cornflakes.
That's
and
I'll
still, even if I'm not weighing my food, I will weigh out my 40 grams of cornflakes to my 180 grams of milk because that's the perfect ratio. Like, and that's my binge now. Like, it's crazy how much it just changes, but it is so much about your habits, and you just can't change it all in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And it's such a long haul.
Yeah, I think, you just have the best story. It's so good. So what is your plans now? Like, I know you said like you're still kind of loose deficit. Do you have a sort of goal that you're trying to get to, or do you have a time frame that you're going to like pivot on the deficit, or?
I don't have any strict goal. And I remember in my last couple of check-ins with you, one of your questions is, what goal are you working towards? I don't really have one. I think because I've finished comp training, and my goal was to sort of get down to a lower weight just to be great on stage and perform really well. I've done all of that. And now I suppose coming into Christmas, I don't have anything I'm working towards, really. I think now that I'm technically finished my time with you, I'm wanting to work on going through my gym programs that I got from you initially and stepping into the gym on my own without you almost there to hold my hand, just to be like, I don't know, I don't have trainer eyes, like even things like that. Like my gym experience is having trainer eyes and having videos and having a really structured way to document what I'm doing in the gym. All of a sudden, when my time with you was coming to an end, I'm like, shit, how do I document it? Like, I don't have trainer eyes. I need to write in like the RPE. So I know I need to write in at what week I increase my sets, I increase my reps. So for me now, I'm trying to step into the gym and just do the same programs and still go and find my feet by myself. And I think I know that it's time for me to sort of take a break from a coach when I don't have as many questions. Yeah. And I feel like I pulled
You're queen of
so
the questions.
many questions out of you. I don't have anything to pull out of you at the moment. And so I feel like that's sort of where I need to step back until I have another goal to work towards. So maybe when I do come into a gaining phase, I feel like having a coach is just, some of my friends don't understand why. Like, why do you put the money into that? Why, can't you do it on your own? Having a coach is just having someone, it's like having a cheerleader in your corner for one specific goal that other people aren't going to get. And
yeah,
you've changed my mindset with things like, people always say, oh, you ask your coach, can I have this? Oh, can I do this? I don't need your permission to do anything. Like, you can tell me something and I can go off and do my own thing. Like, I'm literally in charge of what I do. And so I think just coming off on my own and, doing that with Jim is just another sort of thing that I just want to do for myself until I feel like I've got somewhere else to be.
I feel like that, I just love that so much, because I think I said it, maybe it hasn't come out yet, but by the time our episode comes out, Georgia and I did a podcast the other day, and I said, like, I never want people feeling like they need Ruby. Like I need to get back and eat like Ruby if I want to succeed. And I never want people to feel like they're in that element of like, I'll just dump my whole like week or whatever on Ruby and I'll do whatever she tells me to do next. I feel like we want to provide everything where you can get all the information, ask all the questions, do everything, come in and say like, I'm thinking of going to maintenance. And this is what's so funny. And I've said this on a few podcasts lately. I don't even think people realize this. Well, you kind of just said it, but everyone in Eat Like Ruby, even if we think about like the Voxer and the Fat Loss Phase Facebook group and everything, everyone comes in and is like, this is my plan. What is your thought? No one's like, Ruby, what should I do? And I love that, because you don't want to be like waiting to be told what to do next. I'll eat whatever my coach tells me to eat. I won't eat what I'm not allowed to eat. Like all of those things. Because I think it just, then it does kind of create that thing where you're like, oh, well, if I ever want to succeed, I need that person there to tell me what to do next. So I just think it's so cool when you hit the point where you're like, oh, I'm quite chill right now. Like you said, you don't have a lot of questions. You don't have a massive goal. So you're good to just kind of cruise. And then if you did turn around next year and be like, you know what, fuck it, I do have a fat loss goal, or join that program, or I do have a gaining goal, or join that, or whatever. And I think it just comes from a place of like, I want to ramp things up a notch, as opposed to like, fuck, I need help.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's just so cool to think again that you're in that position.
It is really cool.
I love it. You are just the best. Do you have, Queen of the Questions, do you have questions, anything?
I have a small question.
Shit,
obviously,
put me on the spot.
It is optimal, as you say, to eat the right amount of protein, like get enough protein, get enough fat, get enough fiber. What happens if you maybe don't do that for a little while, but you're still in a calorie deficit? Or what happens if you don't do it for a long time, but you're still in a calorie deficit? Like, obviously, I know with fiber, it's good for our, like,
movement
pooping and stuff. And, you know, fats, we need it for, like, hormone health and all that sort of stuff. Protein, muscle growth, all that sort of stuff, hunger. But what happens if you're not quite reaching them? Like, what does that do for someone, but they're still in a calorie deficit?
Yeah, so someone that has a fat loss goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty much exactly like you said. I feel like you half answered your own question, but just those things won't be optimized. So especially protein would be probably the thing we would notice the most in terms of body comp and result with the deficit. So protein, I don't even know if I've said this on the pod, but I've probably said it in masterclasses. Protein has what we call the highest thermic effect of feeding, which means the work and therefore the calories that our body actually burns to consume, digest and absorb protein is higher than other foods. So if you were to be, let's say your deficit was 1,500 calories, if you were to eat 1,500 calories with no protein versus eating 1,500 calories with protein, your body would actually burn more calories that day. Therefore, your deficit would be bigger and more effective with more protein coming in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then protein, obviously, like you said, will maintain, if we're in a gaining phase, it'll help build, but it will also help maintain lean mass, aka muscle, when we're in that deficit. So often if we see a person just diet really hard, usually with a bit of lack of education, like maybe a juice diet or something, is when we can tend to see people drop weight really quickly, but not really look too like toned or lean. They can look a bit scrawny, a bit like I don't want to say unwell, but you know when you see a person where you're like, yeah, you've lost a lot of weight, but I wouldn't say you look great.
Yeah, like a skinny fat.
Yeah. So protein will absolutely help like maintain that shape and that overall mass while dropping the body fat. So just giving that way better physique. And that's, like I said, that's sort of the body comp benefits. But when we talk about protein building and repairing in the body, it also does that for all tissue in the body. So when we talk about it in terms of nutrition and training and body comp and whatever, we tend to talk about protein building and repairing muscle tissue, but it's doing it for all tissue in the body. So the body constantly wants protein to rebuild and repair over and over and over. So if we didn't have protein coming in for a long time, like that would be really not, what's the word?
Detrimental.
Yeah, I was like, what's the opposite of beneficial? Detrimental to just overall health in terms of like bone health, muscle mass, all those things. Even if we think about it, I don't like to touch on this shit lightly, but people that are like in famine situations, big lack of protein and therefore big lack of, you know, growth and muscle and bone strength and everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So then on the opposite side of that, what happens if you're consuming too much? Because obviously your body can only absorb a certain amount.
Yeah.
Are you just peeing it out?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, okay.
And there was a big thing a long time ago where people would say, oh, it's bad for the kidneys, like too much protein will be bad for the kidneys. That was a big thing years ago, and then they did quite a bit of study where they were like, no, that's not really the case. It's more just not serving any purpose at all. So like you said, it's literally just coming in and going out. So usually the reason we sort of say to not just go too high unnecessarily is because obviously if you're in a deficit and you are trying to get fiber and fat and everything else, if you're taking up like really they become unnecessary calories for protein, you're just going to find it harder to include those things. So there's just no point, and then you're going to make it quite harder in other areas.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So another question. I didn't think I had any, but now they're just coming to me. When you structure a gym program, you obviously do like upper, lower, full body. Why don't you put in like shoulders, quads? Like why do you not do specific like targeted areas?
Yeah, we sometimes do if like when we've done more personalized programs, if someone wants it. I personally find like I think we want to hit things more than once a week. So often if we break it down too much like that, like we just going to hit quads once a week, shoulders once a week, tricep once a week, all of those things. I think if we can combo things and if we can work in, like let me know if I lose you, I confuse you. If we can work in things that are like compound lifts, so like a RDL, for example, is going to work like glutes and hammies, a little bit of back work. I personally think if we can bring that in, we're going to obviously factor that into a lower body day, but we're going to get some lat work in there as well. And then, you know, that there'll be so much crossover where if we were to be like, this is just an isolated back day on Monday, then that's done for the week. And then it's isolated hamstrings on Tuesday, then that's done for the week. And everything just gets hit that one time. So some people do like to do that. But I personally find most chicks want to hit glutes and hammies more than once. And if we start to be like, okay, you want to hit them more than once, then you also want to hit triceps and biceps and shoulders and chest and back and abs. And people usually want to hit abs more than once. And if we want to really sort of factor in those things that people want to hit often, if we piece all them in, then it's like it doesn't make sense to really break it down in those isolated lifts, in my opinion. If we can kind of structure it, if we look at a, say, 2 upper, 2 lower, we're going to hit the hammies twice, hit the glutes twice, hit the quads twice, we're going to hit the lats twice. If people want to work on things like chin-ups, push-ups, all of that, we can work on them twice. Usually we'll put in abs so we can hit them twice. I just think it works out that we can hit the things we want to hit more often. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people do it, and there's so many ways. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do that. Obviously, dudes tend to do it a bit more because they probably don't want to hit glutes and hammies 2 or 3 times a week. They do want to hit triceps twice a week or whatever. So there's absolutely no right or wrong way. But usually I found if we break it up into like a typical sort of bro split, usually that can be like back and bis is one day, chest and tris is one, maybe shoulders on its own, and then you've got quads and hammies. So everything's getting hit once. And then for chicks, we tend to have then hit upper body 3 times and lower body twice. Whereas most chicks, if they could pick, they'd have it the other way around. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then last question. I feel like maybe I've asked this before, but maybe I haven't. Obviously, carbs would be, I'm assuming, the body's most preferred energy source, but you don't give a specific carb target. So if you were someone who typically sat lower carbs, where does your body end up pulling that energy source from? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So your body will pull energy from any source. And usually people tend to, if they are just naturally gravitating towards lower carb, like you said, then they'll usually be just by default higher dietary fat coming in. So the body will pull it from there. It's just when we go into a high intensity training session, the body looks for those carbs first. So if they're there, awesome, bang, let's go. If they're not, it'll be like, okay, what's next? And therefore, what's sort of like the backup plan, if you will. So it's definitely not bad or wrong. Like if we've still got the energy there, that's great. But it's just like, where is the body going first for that number one source and see if it's there or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it wouldn't affect, like in terms of like fat loss or performance. I suppose performance-wise, then would be encouraged to be having more carbs.
Yeah, so for performance-wise, we normally would. With fat loss, I don't think there's a preference of higher fat, higher carb, lower fat, lower carb. And a lot of studies have shown that if calories are on point and then sufficient protein coming in, that ratio of carbs to fat doesn't seem to affect the fat loss. With performance though, like you said, so if somebody especially is getting after it in the gym or like running, things like that, and that's why we tend to, I don't know if you've read much, you would have read because you go over everything, like all the pre-training info that we supply and stuff is all about carbs. So if we're going into a session, whether it's gym or running or whatever, like I said, we want that pre-training meal to be a carb source so that optimal energy source is sitting there.
Yeah. And I know I said it was the last question, but last question because it sort of leads into it. Why then do some coaches prescribe a carb target? Like my first coach did prescribe protein, fats, carbs, and I was sort of expected to sort of, sit pretty close to all of those targets. What would be the benefit in prescribing someone that rather than what you do? Yeah. And this is definitely not a right or wrong thing. Like there's nothing wrong with people that do that. And that's so common. So many people do. And that's the typical sort of like tracking macros if it fits your macros. Like if we think about macros, that's carbs, fat, protein. So most people have a target of each of those to hit. Coaches do it for a few reasons. One of the main reasons that we see, and I see this all the time, is people trying to line everything up in MyFitnessPal. Like, well, how much do I eat and what do I set the targets to and all of that? If we think about the way it works, our macros are what make up our calories. So if we get a calorie target, let's say of 1,800, there'll be a percentage of that that's protein, a percentage that's carbs, and a percentage that's fat. And then most coaches will divvy that up into those percentages and give you the targets. So there can be an element where people are like, well, what do I aim for? Like, how do I make it all add up? The other thing that can be beneficial is some people, like we said, some people just naturally have that preference to higher carbs or higher fat. If people alternate that a lot, some people can see issues with like digestion and energy and things like that. If we think about, like what we just said with carbs providing energy, and again, it's quite an individual thing, but dietary fat can be a little bit, I feel like I'm getting like deja vu that we've spoken about this before, but if some people find they go really high dietary fat, they can have some digestion issues, like they're a little bit sluggish. So if you've got a consistent target, like you're hitting the same fat, same carbs, everything every day, we tend to remove the possibility of any of those things happening. So that can be great for some people as well. And most people tend to find that even when we do give, like what I give with the protein and the minimum fat and stuff, most people tend to hang around that same spot every day. Like you said, you find your foods and you just stick with them. And most people do tend to have a preference of gravitating towards carbs or fat. So there doesn't tend to be big
like waves in those every day anyway. But if someone is having a lot of digestion issues or energy issues, if things are just really up and down, it can be beneficial to find sort of one steady place or one steady intake and hit that over and over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
I always ask if it makes sense because I'm like, did I just go to a random place?
It's funny, every time you're like on the podcast, you're like, look, I'm sorry, I just went on a tangent. It's literally why we're here. Like every time you go on a tangent, I'm like, here we go.
She's on.
I'm really sorry it's a long episode. Why am I here? Like I'm wanting your input.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love it. Is there any other questions?
I think that's it for now.
No, I love it. Well, thank you so much. So we've just done pretty much a 50-minute episode, so I reckon that's a good one. But thank you so much for coming on. I think just cool to hear people's stories. I think people will love to hear it. Would you have any final words? Let's say someone like you've obviously been in a position of being 30 to 40 kilos heavier. You've got 2 kids, single mom at times. If somebody was in any of those positions and thinking that they couldn't do anything about it, what would you tell them?
If you don't do something now, the time's going to pass anyway. Like the whole reason my motivation for doing this is so different to my motivation when I started. It's not just about looking good and feeling good anymore. I don't want to be, I think I've had so many injuries, my knee first of all, and now I have a pretty bad back injury, which knocks me on my bum a lot. I don't want to be a 50-year-old and having to take an elevator because I physically can't take the stairs. That scares the shit out of me. And if you don't start now, it's just going to be so much harder to start later. The time's going to pass anyway, so why not do something about it? There was something I saw on Instagram the other day. It was something like, yeah, you could start in January, but then you've missed a month and a half. Like you've missed a month and a half of getting started and going through that teething period to maybe be in a better position. And yeah, like why waste the time?
Yeah.
Don't sit here next year thinking, fuck, I wish I did something last year.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. And you are like literally the example of it. You did it.
I did.
Go, Kay. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody will benefit from hearing this. I think it was awesome.
Thank you so much for everything.
Like,
you'll make me cry again if I keep saying thank you. But no, seriously, thank you for everything. If you had told me, even in January that you'd be like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? What do you mean? Like just sitting here having a conversation. I remember our first phone call.
And you were like, I'm so starstruck.
I was telling my kids, I'm like, guys, I've got a call with Ruby. Like, don't come in. And we ended up sitting there. Like one of our calls, it was half an hour scheduled calls that we could have with you. We ended up sitting here for like an hour and 20 minutes.
I remember. And it was like getting later and later at night. And you were like, I've just got a few more questions. And I'm like, this is my jam. I don't care. Like 10 past 8, who cares? Keep going.
I'm like, I can just ask one more. You're like, no, like you've got more. Just come on, just hit me with it. And I just love that it's just been, I've just had such a good experience with you and I could not be more thankful. So thank you.
No, my absolute pleasure, honestly. I love it. You were like literally just the definition of why I do it. So it's so cool. It's awesome. But thank you so much for coming on.
Amazing.
Love it.